Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're taking a closer look at 5 of the most valuable and fascinating Washington quarter dollar coins ever collected. Some of these rare quarters are highly sought after because of their scarce mint marks, unusual varieties, and exceptional condition, with certain examples reaching thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars at auction. So before you spend your old Washington quarters, stay with us, because one small detail could make a huge difference in value. So let's get started. First up. Coin number 1, the United States Washington quarter dollar from 1965, specifically the Philadelphia issue that carries no mint mark. If you have an old 1965 quarter sitting in a jar, drawer, or collection, you may be wondering whether it is worth more than its face value. While most circulated 1965 Washington quarters are common and usually worth only a small premium, certain examples can attract stronger collector interest because of their condition, eras, varieties, or exceptional preservation. So before spending that old quarter, let's examine what makes the 1965 issue interesting and what it can realistically be worth. The 1965 Washington quarter is an important coin in United States numismatic history because it was part of the major transition from traditional silver coinage to copper-nickel-clad coinage. Rising silver prices and a shortage of circulating coins led the United States Mint to change the quarter's composition. Beginning in 1965, Washington quarters were made with a copper-nickel outer layer bonded to a pure copper core instead of the previous 90% silver composition. The 1965 quarter was produced in very large numbers, and Philadelphia-produced examples generally have no mint mark. This means that the absence of a mint mark on a 1965 quarter is normal and does not, by itself, make the coin rare. The obverse features the famous portrait of George Washington facing left, designed by John Flanagan, with the inscriptions "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date 1965. On the reverse, you will see a heraldic eagle with outstretched wings surrounded by the inscriptions United States of America, EPLUOBUSUNUM, and quarter dollar. The 1965 quarter has a copper-nickel-clad appearance, which can often be identified by examining the edge. Unlike earlier silver quarters, a normal 1965 clad quarter should show a copper-colored line or core on the edge. This composition change is one of the most historically significant characteristics of the coin. Here is where collectors need to be careful. A circulated 1965 Washington quarter without a mint mark is generally not considered a rare coin simply because it lacks a mint mark. Millions were produced, so ordinary worn examples are plentiful. However, collectors may pay considerably more for coins with unusual minting errors, strong varieties, exceptional surfaces, or very high grades. A circulated coin with an authentic major error can be far more interesting than an ordinary example. Condition also matters. Heavy wear, scratches, stains, and damage usually keep the value low, while coins with unusually sharp details and attractive surfaces can command stronger prices. For an ordinary circulated 1965 Washington quarter without a mint mark, the market value is generally close to its face value, with many examples trading for only a modest premium depending on condition and the buyer. It is important not to confuse the dramatic prices sometimes reported for rare 1965 quarters with the value of a normal circulated example. Exceptional certified coins, major errors, or unusual varieties can bring substantially higher prices at auction, sometimes reaching hundreds or even thousands of dollars when the right combination of rarity, condition, authentication, and collector demand is present. Auction records should therefore be viewed as exceptional cases, not as the expected value of every 1965 quarter. If you find a 1965 quarter without a mint mark, do not clean or polish it. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and reduce collector appeal. Examine the date, lettering, edge, and major design areas under good lighting. Look for unusual doubling, missing or distorted details, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, strange metal characteristics, or other signs that could indicate a genuine minting error. A basic magnifying glass can help, but photographs and online comparisons should only be used as a starting point. If you believe you have a significant error or an unusually high-grade example, consider having it examined by a reputable coin dealer or professional grading service before assuming it is a valuable rarity. So, is your 1965 Washington quarter without a mint mark a hidden fortune? Usually, no. In circulated condition, the typical coin is common and does not command the huge prices associated with famous rare coin auction discoveries. But that does not mean it is worthless or uninteresting. The 1965 quarter represents an important turning point in American coinage, and unusual errors, varieties, and exceptional condition examples can be much more desirable to collectors. The next time you find a 1965 Washington quarter, take a closer look before putting it back into circulation. You might not have $1,000 treasure, but you could discover an interesting piece of American numismatic history, and that is exactly what makes coin collecting so exciting. Next coin, the 1970 Washington quarter dollar. This quarter was struck at the Denver Mint and carries the small D mint mark on the obverse, just below Washington's neck. If you have a 1970 quarter in excellent condition, you may be wondering whether it could be worth significantly more than its 25-cent face value. While most examples are common, high-grade coins and unusual varieties can attract serious collector attention. So let's explore the history, features, rarity, condition, and potential market value of this interesting quarter. The 1970 Washington quarter was produced during an important period in American coinage. By this time, the United States had already moved away from the traditional 90% silver composition used for quarters before 1965. The 1970 quarter was made from copper-nickel-clad material, consisting of outer layers of copper-nickel bonded to a copper core. The coin was struck at the Denver Mint, which is identified by the D mint mark. Washington quarters from this era were primarily intended for everyday circulation, and large quantities were produced. Because of that, an ordinary circulated 1970 quarter is not considered an extremely rare coin. The obverse of the 1970 Washington quarter features the familiar portrait of President George Washington facing left. Around the portrait are the inscriptions "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date, 1970. The D mint mark beneath Washington's neck identifies the Denver Mint as the place of production. On the reverse is the classic eagle design, with the inscriptions United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, and quarter dollar. One of the most important characteristics of a 1970 quarter is its condition. A coin described as excellent should have strong details, attractive surfaces, and relatively little wear. However, professional grading can make a major difference when determining whether a coin is truly high grade. The key point for collectors is that the 1970 quarter itself is not automatically rare simply because it has a D mint mark or because it is several decades old. Large numbers were produced, and many examples remain available today. What can make a particular 1970 quarter valuable is exceptional preservation, a high certified grade, or an authentic minting error or variety. Collectors often compete for coins that are difficult to find in top condition because many coins from circulation developed scratches, contact marks, dull surfaces, and wear. A beautifully preserved example can therefore be considerably more desirable than an ordinary circulated coin. When it comes to value, it is important to separate ordinary coins from exceptional examples. A normal circulated 1970 Washington quarter generally has a value close to its face value, although its exact worth can vary with condition and market demand. An excellent or uncirculated example can bring a higher premium, particularly if it receives a strong professional grade. Truly exceptional certified examples, as well as legitimate major errors or rare varieties, can potentially reach hundreds or even thousands of dollars in specialized auctions. However, these high prices apply only to extraordinary coins and should not be treated as the value of every 1970 quarter. Auction results can also change over time depending on grade, eye appeal, rarity, certification, and collector competition. If you have a 1970D quarter that looks unusually sharp and clean, handle it carefully and avoid cleaning it. Never polish or chemically clean a potentially valuable coin because altered surfaces can seriously reduce collector appeal. Use good lighting and a magnifying glass to inspect Washington's portrait, the date, the D mint mark, lettering, and the eagle on the reverse. Pay attention to unusual doubling, off-center strikes, clipped edges, missing details, or other characteristics that might indicate a genuine mint error. If the coin appears to be in exceptional condition, professional authentication and grading can help establish its true grade and market potential. In conclusion, the 1970D Washington quarter is an interesting piece of American coinage, but its age and D mint mark alone do not make it a rare fortune. Most examples are common, especially those that circulated heavily. The real excitement begins when you find an unusually well-preserved coin, a scarce variety, or a genuine minting error. A high-grade certified example can attract strong collector interest and potentially command impressive prices in the right auction. So before you spend your old 1970D quarter, take a close look at its condition and details. That ordinary-looking 25-cent coin might just have something special that deserves a second look. Next coin, the United States Washington quarter dollar from 1990, specifically the coin carrying the D mint mark from the Denver Mint. If you have a 1990D quarter in your collection or have found one in circulated condition, you may be wondering whether this ordinary-looking coin could actually be worth big money. The truth is that most 1990D Washington quarters are common, but certain examples with unusual errors, varieties, or exceptional grades can attract serious collector attention. So let's explore its history, important features, rarity, and potential market value. The Washington quarter has been part of American coinage since 1932, when it was introduced to honor George Washington. By 1990, the quarter was being produced as a copper-nickel-clad coin, with a copper core surrounded by layers of copper-nickel alloy. The D mint mark indicates that the coin was struck at the Denver Mint. The 1990D quarter was produced in large quantities for everyday circulation, which means ordinary circulated examples are generally not considered rare. However, coins from this era can still be interesting to collectors when they show unusual characteristics or survive in particularly attractive condition. The obverse of the 1990D Washington quarter displays the familiar portrait of George Washington facing left. Around the portrait are the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1990. The reverse features the American eagle with outstretched wings, along with United States of America, EPLUOBUSUNUM, and quarter dollar. The small D mint mark can be found below the wreath and above the denomination area on the reverse. In fine condition, the coin will normally show noticeable circulation wear, with some of the finer details softened, but the main design still clearly visible. This is an important point for collectors. A normal 1990D quarter in fine condition is not considered a major rarity simply because it has a D mint mark. The Denver Mint produced many examples, and circulated coins remain relatively easy to find. What can change the value is something unusual. Genuine mint errors, significant die varieties, attractive uncirculated examples, and coins with strong certification can be much more desirable. Collectors also appreciate coins with original surfaces and minimal damage. Therefore, if you have a 1990D quarter, the most important question is not simply whether it has a D mint mark, but whether the coin has a feature that separates it from the millions of normal examples. For a typical 1990D Washington quarter in fine circulated condition, the value is generally modest and often close to face value. The exact price can vary depending on the coin's condition, appearance, demand, and whether it has a recognized variety or error. High prices seen in auctions for Washington quarters should not automatically be applied to an ordinary circulated 1990D example. Exceptional auction results usually involve coins with unusual rarity, remarkable condition, or significant minting errors. A genuinely rare 1990D error could potentially sell for much more than face value, but it must be authenticated before making any big value claim. In other words, a normal fine condition coin should not be expected to bring hundreds or thousands of dollars simply because it is from 1990. If you discover a 1990 D quarter, start by examining it carefully under good lighting. Check the date and mint mark, then inspect the lettering, portrait, eagle, rim, and edge for anything unusual. Look for obvious off-center strikes, clipped planchets, major doubling, unusual metal characteristics, or other signs of a genuine mint error. Avoid cleaning the coin because polishing or chemical cleaning can damage its original surface and reduce its collector appeal. If you believe you have an unusual error or an exceptionally well-preserved specimen, compare it with reliable numismatic references and consider having it evaluated by a reputable coin dealer or professional grading service. Authentication is especially important when a coin appears to have potentially valuable characteristics. So is the 1990 D Washington quarter in fine condition a hidden treasure? For most examples, the answer is no. It is a relatively common circulated quarter, and its ordinary value is generally modest. However, that does not mean you should ignore every 1990 D quarter you find. Coin collecting is all about identifying the unusual details that separate an ordinary coin from a collectible one. A genuine mint error, scarce variety, or exceptionally preserved example can create much stronger collector demand and potentially produce an impressive auction result. So before spending your next 1990 D Washington quarter, take a close look at it. That little D may be common, but the right combination of rarity, condition, and authenticity is what can turn an ordinary-looking quarter into an exciting numismatic discovery. Next coin, the United States Washington quarter, dated 1967, supposedly with a D mint mark, and especially an example in very fine circulated condition. This is an interesting coin because 1967 was part of a major transition period in American coinage. But there is one extremely important detail every collector should know before calling a 1967 quarter a 1967 D. So, stay with us as we explore its history, design, rarity, collector demand, market value, and the possibility of finding a valuable example. The 1967 Washington quarter was produced during the United States coin shortage of the 1960s. The Coinage Act of 1965 eliminated mint marks on circulating coins from 1965 through 1967 as the mint tried to discourage coin collecting and increase the amount of currency available for circulation. According to the U.S. Mint marks returned in 1968. This means a genuine, regular 1967 Washington quarter should not have a D mint mark. The Denver Mint did produce 1967 quarters, with 632,767,848 struck there, but no mint mark was placed on circulating examples. Philadelphia produced 873,524,000, while San Francisco produced 17,740,000. Therefore, if you see a 1967 quarter advertised as a 1967 D, be very careful. What appears to be a D may actually be damage, a design feature, or an altered coin rather than an official Denver Mint mark. The 1967 Washington quarter is a copper-nickel-clad coin with a copper core, rather than the 90% silver composition used on Washington quarters dated 1964 and earlier. The obverse features George Washington facing left, with the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1967. The reverse displays the American eagle along with United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, and quarter dollar. For a very fine circulated example, the coin should show noticeable wear on Washington's hair and the eagle's feathers, while many major design details remain visible. Because the 1967 issue was heavily produced, ordinary circulated examples are not considered major rarities. However, the historical importance of the coin and the difficulty of finding exceptionally preserved examples make it an interesting date for collectors. Here is the most important point. A normal circulated 1967 quarter is not rare simply because it came from Denver. In fact, the lack of a mint mark is completely normal for 1967 circulating quarters. PCGS notes that circulated 1967 quarters were common and that collector attention is concentrated much more heavily on high-grade mint state examples. The real opportunity comes from exceptional condition, genuine mint errors, and very high certified grades. The 1967 issue also has another interesting category called Special Mint Set, or SMS, coins. These were specially produced pieces and can look different from ordinary business strikes. Collectors should be careful not to confuse an SMS coin with a regular circulation strike. Now let's talk about the money. For a normal 1967 Washington quarter in very fine circulated condition, the value is generally modest and should not be confused with the spectacular prices sometimes seen in auction headlines. The large majority of circulated examples do not sell for hundreds or thousands of dollars. However, condition can dramatically change the market. Current PCGS pricing information lists approximately $16 to $18 for a 1967 quarter around MS65, $20 to $35 around MS66, $100 to $850 around MS67, and up to about $5,250 around MS68, depending on the specific market and grade. And there are documented auction results showing just how high an exceptional example can go. PCGS records an auction record of $8,812.50 for a PCGS MS68 1967 Washington quarter sold by Heritage Auctions on January 4, 2017. This is an exceptional certified coin, not a typical very fine circulated quarter, so collectors should never assume that every 1967 quarter is worth thousands. If you have a 1967 Washington quarter, first inspect the date and carefully examine the area where a mint mark would normally be expected. Remember that a genuine 1967 circulating quarter should not have a D mint mark. Do not clean, polish, scratch, or alter the coin. Cleaning can seriously hurt its collector value. Next, look for unusual characteristics such as major doubling, off-center strikes, clipped planchets, missing design elements, or unusual metal problems. If your coin appears dramatically different from a normal 1967 quarter, have it examined by a reputable coin dealer or professional grading service. For valuable coins, authentication is especially important because altered coins can sometimes be mistaken for rare mint errors. So the 1967 Washington quarter is definitely an interesting coin, but there is an important correction to the popular 1967 D quarter story. Regular 1967 circulating quarters did not carry mint marks, even though Denver produced hundreds of millions of them. A very fine circulated example is generally not a huge money rarity. The big auction values belong primarily to exceptional high-grade coins, special pieces, or genuine errors. With an auction record reaching $8,812.50 for an MS68 example, however, the 1967 quarter shows why condition and authentication matter so much in coin collecting. So before you spend that old quarter, take a closer look. You may not have a fortune, but you could have a fascinating piece of American coinage history. Next coin, the United States Washington quarter dollar coin from 1980 with the D mint mark, specifically an example in very circulated condition. This is an interesting coin for collectors because the 1980 D quarter was produced at the Denver Mint and can still be found in circulation or old collections. But the big question is, can a heavily circulated 1980 D Washington quarter really be worth big money? In this video, we will explore its history, important features, rarity, collector demand, realistic market value, and what you should look for before deciding that your coin is a valuable rarity. The Washington quarter has been part of American coinage since 1932, originally created to honor George Washington. By 1980, the United States Mint was producing Washington quarters in the copper-nickel-clad composition introduced in 1965. The 1980 D issue was struck at the Denver Mint, and the small D mint mark can be found on the obverse beneath Washington's neck. Unlike earlier silver Washington quarters, the 1980 D quarter does not contain silver as part of its normal composition. Large quantities were produced for everyday commerce, meaning the coin was intended primarily as a circulating piece rather than a scarce collector issue. The obverse shows the familiar portrait of George Washington facing left, with Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1980. Beneath Washington's neck is the important D Mint mark, identifying the Denver Mint. On the reverse, an American eagle spreads its wings, surrounded by United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, and quarter dollar. Because this particular example is very circulated, you may see noticeable wear on Washington's hair, cheek, jaw, and other high points. The reverse eagle and lettering can also lose some detail through years of handling. The edge of a normal-clad quarter typically reveals the copper-colored core between the outer layers. Now let's discuss rarity. An ordinary 1980D Washington quarter in very circulated condition is generally not considered a rare coin. The Denver Mint produced a large number of these quarters, and circulated examples remain relatively obtainable. The D Mint mark itself does not make the coin rare. However, collectors may become much more interested when a 1980D quarter has a genuine minting error, unusual variety, exceptionally attractive surfaces, or an unusually high certified grade. This distinction is extremely important because online videos and auction headlines sometimes show extraordinary prices for exceptional coins, while ordinary circulated examples may be worth only a small amount above face value, or sometimes simply their face value. So what could a very circulated 1980D Washington quarter actually be worth? For a normal, heavily circulated example with no major error or unusual variety, the value is generally around its face value, with only a modest premium possible depending on collector demand and the coin's exact condition. The dramatic auction prices you may hear about usually involve coins that are exceptionally preserved, professionally certified, or possess a rare and authenticated mint error. Those special examples can potentially sell for hundreds or even thousands of dollars, but such prices should never be assumed for an ordinary circulated 1980D quarter. If your coin is heavily worn, scratched, stained, or damaged, its value is usually much lower than that of a high-grade example. If you have a 1980D quarter, start by checking the mint mark and date carefully. Use good lighting and, if possible, a magnifying glass to examine the lettering, numbers, Washington's portrait, and the reverse design. Look for unusual doubling, off-center strikes, clipped edges, missing design elements, or other characteristics that might indicate a genuine minting error. Be cautious of damage caused by circulation, machines, scratches, or cleaning, because these can sometimes look like errors. Most importantly, never clean the coin in an attempt to make it look newer. Cleaning can permanently damage the surface and reduce its collector appeal. If you believe you have an unusual error or an exceptionally preserved example, consider getting an expert opinion or professional authentication before spending money on grading. In conclusion, the 1980D Washington quarter is an interesting piece of modern United States coinage, but a very circulated example is generally not a rare or extremely valuable coin simply because it has the D Mint mark. Its real potential comes from unusual errors, varieties, or exceptional condition. While extraordinary examples can bring impressive prices at auction, most heavily circulated 1980D quarters remain close to face value. So before you dismiss an old quarter, take a careful look at it. Check the date, mint mark, condition, and especially the possibility of a genuine minting error. You may not have a fortune in your pocket, but you could still have an interesting piece of American coin collecting history. And that is what makes searching through old coins so exciting. Last and final coin, the United States Washington quarter dollar coin, dated 1980, carrying the P Mint mark, and found in very worn, heavily circulated condition. Many people wonder whether an old quarter like this could be worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars. The exciting truth is that while a normal worn 1980p Washington quarter is generally common, unusual errors, varieties, and exceptional examples can attract serious collector attention. So let's explore its history, features, rarity, and realistic market value. The 1980p Washington quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint and carries a small P Mint mark, identifying its place of production. By 1980, The Washington quarter had been produced in copper-nickel-clad composition for more than a decade. The coin continued the design introduced in 1932 to honor George Washington, the first president of the United States. Millions of Washington quarters were produced during this period for everyday commerce, meaning that many 1980p examples entered circulation and became heavily worn. Because of this large production and survival rate, an ordinary circulated 1980p quarter is not considered a major rarity. The obverse of the 1980p Washington quarter features George Washington facing left, with the inscriptions Liberty, In God We Trust, and the date 1980. The reverse displays the American eagle with its wings spread, surrounded by United States of America, EPLUBUSUNUM, and quarter dollar. The P mint mark appears on the obverse, near the lower right area of Washington's bust. Since this is a clad quarter, the edge normally reveals the copper core between the outer layers of copper-nickel alloy. In a very worn coin, many of these design details can become weak, but the date and mint mark may still be identifiable. Now comes the most important point. A very worn 1980p Washington quarter is generally not rare simply because it is old or because it has a P mint mark. Large numbers were produced, and circulated examples remain widely available. However, collectors pay attention to genuine mint errors and unusual varieties. A coin with an authentic major striking error, significant off-center strike, clipped planchet, or another recognized variety can be substantially more desirable than an ordinary worn example. Condition also plays an important role. A heavily circulated coin normally has much less value than a sharply preserved, professionally graded specimen. For a normal, very worn 1980p Washington quarter, the value is usually around face value, and in many transactions, it may simply spend as a regular 25-cent coin. It should not automatically be valued at hundreds or thousands of dollars. High auction prices reported online often involve exceptional conditions, certified high-grade coins, or unusual errors and varieties rather than ordinary circulated pieces. If a 1980p quarter has a genuine and significant mint error, its value can potentially rise into much higher ranges depending on the type and severity of the error, authentication, condition, and collector demand. The biggest prices are therefore exceptions, not the normal value for a worn 1980p quarter. If you find a worn 1980p Washington quarter, examine it carefully before spending it. Do not clean, polish, scratch, or chemically treat the coin because cleaning can damage its original surface and hurt its collector value. Use good lighting and, if possible, a magnifying glass to inspect the date, mint mark, lettering, eagle, rim, and edge. Pay particular attention to unusual shapes, missing portions, doubling, off-center designs, or other characteristics that appear inconsistent with a normal quarter. Remember that damage caused by circulation is not the same as a mint error. If something looks genuinely unusual, have it evaluated by a reputable coin dealer or professional grading service before making any assumptions about its value. In conclusion, the 1980p Washington quarter in very worn condition is an interesting piece of American coinage, but an ordinary example is generally common rather than extremely rare. Its P mint mark identifies the Philadelphia Mint, and its copper-nickel-clad composition reflects the era of modern U.S. coinage. While a normal worn specimen is usually worth little more than face value, genuine errors and unusual varieties can create much stronger collector demand and potentially impressive auction results. So before you dismiss an old quarter as ordinary pocket change, take a close look. The key is not simply the year or mint mark, but the coin's authenticity, condition, variety, and any genuine minting error that could make it stand out from millions of others. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more exciting rare coin discoveries, valuable US coins, and fascinating numismatic stories. Keep checking your coins, you never know when you might find a hidden treasure. Until next time, happy coin hunting, money.